Okay, let's get started with lesson 5 of the best Hebrew class ever. It's the best because of the students.
Oh. Have you kept the same header for all of
This
these?
one
Yeah.
has been the same.
Okay.
I've seen no reason to erase it, or I did go over it once though. Alright, last time we went over the binyamin, but 2/3 of the class was not here last time, so I'm going to go over the binyamin again. Last time we went through the past tense, and today we're going to go through the future tense. So, to recap, what are binyamin? The word binyan in Hebrew means building, like we are inside a binyan right now. But in grammar, binyan means structure in terms of verbs, verbal structures, right? So we've got 7 binyanim, 7 structures. So how does it work? It's not a tense, it's not like past tense, future tense, because each one of these structures has a past tense and future tense. So it's like a template. Each structure is a template that you take the root, which the meaning of the verb is always in the root. The core meaning of it is in the root, which is usually 3 letters. Those 3 letters have a certain meaning, right? And we'll look at a lot of examples, but you take those letters and you plug them into the template. So each one of these is a structure, it's a different template. Now why we have 7 different templates? As I said last time, it's not like just random. Oh, okay, well this one's Pa'al, that one's Nifa, that's Gil. Each structure or template or binyan, right? Each binyan has its own meaning. In addition to the meaning of the root, it's a different type of meaning. So what does it mean? It has a grammatical meaning. So the actual meaning of the verb is in the root, but the grammatical meaning, which is like another layer of meaning over it, is in the binyan. How does it work? You got the one, I only had the one copy there so you guys can share. I think you had one from last time, right?
Yeah.
This is just an overview. So you've got Pa'al. Pa'al is the most common binyan form. And it's maybe considered like your baseline, I don't know. It's also not necessarily the easiest one. Sometimes it's the hardest one because it has a lot of exceptions are in this one. But it's also can be considered like the most basic one because it's the most common one. Now, Pa'al can be transitive or intransitive, meaning transitive, it means it can have a direct object. So you're doing an action to something, right, affecting something, versus intransitive, you're just doing an action. For example, walking. I'm walking. That is an intransitive, right? But if I say I'm walking the dog, that's transitive because I'm doing the action to something. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So certain verbs are just intransitive by definition, like running, right? Or jumping, right? It's just an action that you do. It's not an action that you do to something. Once you do an action to something, that's a transitive verb. So this is just a little tip that sometimes it can be transitive or intransitive. Pa'al can be either transitive or intransitive. And it's always in the active voice. Active voice meaning the subject is doing the action. What is passive voice? Passive voice means that the action is being done to something, there is no subject, right? So for example, Yael is eating the cake, right? Having an action on the cake, that's active voice. The cake was eaten, we don't know who ate it, that's passive voice. In the passive voice, you flip it, and the object of the action, the receiver of the action becomes the subject of the sentence. And the doer of the action is unknown. That's the passive voice. You could designate the doer of the action by saying, the cake was eaten by Yael, right? You could say that, but you still have the same passive voice structure. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. All right. So the Nifa sometimes may be the passive voice of Pa'al, okay? And sometimes it can also just be an intransitive verb. So sometimes people think, oh, it's just always the passive voice of Pa'al, and then they come across a verb like nichnas, which means to enter. And it's like, well, what does that mean? How is that a passive voice of anything? Nichnas. No, That's an active voice, but it's just intransitive. So this nifal can be an intransitive verb or passive voice of pa. Sometimes it goes together with pa. PL is oftentimes a similar meaning to pa'al, but a more intense meaning. So on the sheet I have here, for example, shavar, he broke. Shiber, in PL, he smashed, right? It can also be transitive or intransitive, and it's in the active voice. So it's similar to pa'al, but it may be a more intense action. It is also sometimes, is just a general pattern in the language. Sometimes PL is like the transitive version of pa'al. So if you have a certain action that may be intransitive in pa'al, it may be transitive in PL. That's a common thing. Now, passive voice of PL is pu'al. Okay, that does not require much explanation. It's just passive. This is always passive of PL. There's nothing else to it. He feel is a causative action. Okay, that means an action that means it's hard to explain this one, but it's like it causes something to happen, right? It causes something to happen. Like we can look at the sheet. Let's look at the sheet.
He's here.
What?
He's here.
Say it.
Like he's here, like to remind someone.
Let's hear. Yeah. Well, that was last time. That was a good example from last time.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So pa'al of the verb would be zocher. It would be zocher. Zocher. This is just an example. Okay. Zocher. It means remember. Let's say remembers. Zocher. But that's pa'al. There's the same root. Zeker, right? In he feel would be, let's do present tense for this one. It will be maskir. Maskir. Okay, would be remind. Right. So you might look at it and say, okay, well, there's clearly some kind of a general similarity here, right? There's that meaning, that similarity that you see between them, that is from this root, right? This root is connected to memory. Like zikaron is memory, or zahor we always see on monuments. We remember the martyrs or something, zahor. Or yizkor in the synagogue, they say yizkor. So this is in pa'al, and this means to remember. This mazkir means to remind, because this is in hifil, which is causative, meaning cause someone to remember. How do you cause someone to remember? You remind them. So the meaning of this is remind, right? And like these are different words, right? And they're different actions. They're connected by the root, which has to do with memory. And the other shade of meaning over it, this grammatical meaning of the binyan, is telling you this is pa'al, which is, in this case, transitive active voice verb. And this is a causative verb, right? Does that make sense? Any questions about that? I know this is like a lot of information. I'm trying to give you the big picture here. Hifil, the passive voice of hifil is hufal. This is just like PL hual, hifil hufal. These come in pairs. Every time you have a PL verb, you will have a pual verb that goes with it. Every time you have a hifil verb, you get a hufal verb that goes with it. That's like always. And then you have hitpa'el. Hitpa'el is a binyan that means it's either reflexive or reciprocal, okay? So we'll see some examples of that also. The example we used last time was lehita hev, to fall in love, right? You can't, to fall in love is the reciprocal thing. Two people fall in love, right? So that's what we say, versus to love would be like an action that you do to someone. All right, does anyone have any questions about this? Because this is a lot of information. Everything's clear? Okay.
Clear as mud.
Clear as mud?
It's hard for me, like abstract wise.
I know, that's why we're gonna go
tenses.
through examples. Yeah, we're going through examples. Alright, but this is just the overview, okay? And by the way, I don't know anybody else who does this. I feel like what I'm doing is insane, it's so crazy, that I'm going through all the binyanim in one lesson. Because I think that if you see the big picture, then you have a better understanding of it. Every Hebrew class I've ever seen, it's always like, every binyan is like a separate class, or like a separate 5 classes on that binyan. Well, by the time you get to the next binyan, you lose the big picture. The big picture being like, the binyan itself has a meaning. Like you can, once you get into it, you can almost predict, you can almost create a verb just from knowing the binyan, the structure of the binyan. You're like, oh, well, this root, this binyan, is what this verb is going to be. So, Hebrew is very, very structured that way. What we're going to go into right now, I'm going to jump into the future tense. And this is the most difficult tense, in my opinion. The past tense, which we did last time, has only suffixes, right? And you can see on the charts here, for every pronoun, you have a different suffix, right? So we went through some of them. Now we're going to take, for example, we're going to start with this root. Okay, the reason I picked these, I went through the book and I picked out ones that had the most examples of different binyanim for the same root. Because this is another point I want to make. Not every binyan exists for every root. Sometimes you'll have a root that only exists in one binyan. Sometimes you have a root that has 2 or 3 binyanim. And just the other binyanim, you may be able to create words following this template or this format. Those words just don't exist in Hebrew. They may be theoretical, but they don't exist. So sometimes you're not using all the binyanim, right? The format will always be the same, but it's not actualized for every single root. Does that make sense?
Do you have pa'al for every root?
Pa'al, no, you don't. You don't. It can be anything. You may have a verb that is nifal and no pa'al. Can you believe
like
that?
Like nichnas, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is a pa'al for that verb, kones, like to gather or whatever.
Okay.
But it has nothing to do really. Doesn't have. I don't know what connection would have with entering. You know, I mean, I guess it's loosely related in meaning, right? To gather, and then to gather people together, to enter them into one area. I don't know. But it's definitely not, nichnas is definitely not the passive voice of kones. Lichnos. It's definitely not related directly.
Right.
But let's see, we're going to do this one today, which is this one. I'm going to write for Kate. I'm going to try to write in the blocky letters. Okay, this is the root. Okay. Right. Yeah, this means this is a root. Gimel nun bet. Right, we're looking right now, we're going to look at the pa'al. Okay. In pa'al, it means to steal. Okay, and we're looking at the future tense. Now the reason I picked this one is because some of them may be a little bit irregular, and we might see one that's irregular next. But this is totally regular. This is like textbook, like exactly like basic, structure. So we're looking at specifically at the future tense right now. So how does it work? First, you'll notice, well, all of them have prefixes, right? First, let me write the pronouns here. Oops. Ani, ata, at, hu, he, anachnu. Okay. Atem. I'm not gonna do atem. I'm just gonna do atem, and I'm gonna do hem. Okay. Just for the simplicity, but like these are the pronouns. Okay, and then the forms are, you're gonna have prefixes. All of them in the future tense, they all have prefixes. And some of them also have suffixes. Okay, so the form is gonna be for ani, the prefix is aleph. Okay. For ata and at, the prefix is tav. But to differentiate between the two forms, the at form has also a suffix yud at the end, okay? Okay? The hu form has the yud in the beginning. Okay, the he form also has tav. And actually nothing at the end. It is identical to the form, the ata form. The ata and the he form are exactly identical for the future, okay? They will always be identical. That's just how it is. There's no connection between them, it just happens to be like, that's the same form. Okay? Anachnu form, which is we, anachnu is we, has a nun in the beginning, okay? Atem form has the tav and the vav at the end, okay? And then the hem form, that which means them, right? They has the yud and the vav at the end, okay? So right away we can see certain patterns. First of all, everything that's second person starts with a tav. You see that? But not this one, this is third person, that's different, right? But you have the atem, right? Ata, at, atem, these all start with tav, right? So there's definitely a connection here. Ata, it starts with tav, I don't know. There's definitely an easy way to remember that. For at, it ends on yud, okay? And for atem, which is plural, it ends on the vav. For a third person, the hu form and the hem form, right? Start with yud, but just like this is plural, ends on a vav, this one also has a vav at the end. So this kind of is a similar way of designating the plural, the ending with the vav. This one is designating for your third person, okay, the yud in the beginning. Now this one, I can't explain why he form, which is a feminine, it's a she form, it means she, why that is a tav and not like a yud or something. I don't know. That's just what it is. It is what it is. Right?
That's
and then
for all verbs?
no, this is for all verbs.
All verbs.
These prefixes. What's beautiful is that you only have to learn these prefixes and suffixes one time. All the changes between the binyanim, the differences in binyanim, happen in other ways. And the same thing for the past tense. All the suffixes of the past tense are the same for all the binyanim. Just like all these prefixes and suffixes, these are the same for all the binyanim. Okay, so the change from binyan to binyan will happen in other ways in other ways, right? With other prefixes or vowels or whatever within the word. Another thing I want to mention, just in a general note, these prefixes are the same, I think, for all Semitic languages. It's really amazing. Because I know for a fact that exactly the same prefixes are used for future tense of Arabic verbs, Aramaic verbs, and Amharic verbs. So this is like across the board, all Semitic languages are structured this way in the future tense. So let's take a look at how to form the pa'al. The pa'al form in the future, right? What I'm showing you here, this is the template that will never change. Because these are the prefixes and suffixes that go with the future tense, right? So now we're going to look at how do you change this root into the pa'al form, right? So for pa'al, what you do is you've got the gimel, the nun, you add a vav, and then you have the bet at the end, right? And that's pronounced egnov. Whoops, this is the wrong letter. Eganov. Okay? Now this is the form. Now I can take this form here, gnov, right, and just plug it in. Except where I have a suffix, the vav is not there. So you can look at the chart to follow along. Wherever there's no suffix, it's just gonna be prefix and gnov. You add the vav in there, right? So egnov, tignov, yignov, tignov, nignov. Wherever I have a suffix, it's gonna be tignevi, right? The vav is not there. It's just tignevi, tignevu, yignevu. Okay? Any questions? Everybody looks bored.
No, confused. So there was no vav in what cases? When the
In the
vav
case
was
where
in
you
N?
have another suffix, right?
Oh, okay.
Because you have another vowel at the end.
Okay.
So think of it like this. It's almost like, it's like in science where you have the conservation of energy law. All right, this is a law. I'm making up a law right here in front of you. This is called the conservation of vowels law in Hebrew, okay? This, if you look at it, it all has the same number, kind of like the same syllables in a way, right? Egnov, right? Well, this one has another extra vowel at the end, so it shortens this vowel. This one disappears. That's really what's happening here. You added a sound at the end, so this one disappears.
Wait, is that actually a rule in Hebrew? You just made that up?
I made it up in terms of being a rule, but yeah, that
Yeah.
is a rule. It's not called conservation of vowels, that's
Okay.
a joke. But this is a rule,
Sounds
and this
good.
happens
I
all the
know.
time.
Yeah.
Think of this. I mean, you know some people, right? So if you say gadol,
Mhm.
what's the feminine form of that?
Godola.
Godola. Do you notice that gadol has two syllables and godola has two syllables?
Mm.
Even though you added one at the end.
Okay.
You added a vowel at the end, but you're missing one in the beginning.
So you retain the original amount of
It does, it's not a general rule, it doesn't always happen,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because sometimes in the present tense, like, in the present tense, gonev and gonevet doesn't follow that rule. But in many cases, when you do add something at the end, like a suffix, you end up shortening something in the middle. That just happens in Hebrew a lot. Okay, so this is the pa'al form, okay? So, let's take a look at another verb that's pa'al. Because I want to show you another, well, I have two of these. I want to show you another example. Let's turn to page number 3. Now we're gonna go to another verb. This verb is also, we're gonna look at the pa'al, but the root here is pei tav het, okay, which means to open. Okay, what do you notice that's different about it from the last one we saw in the future? You'll see exactly the same prefixes and suffixes, but what's different here in the middle?
There's no vav.
There's no vav, yeah. Some of the verbs in pa'al end on the ah sound instead of the o sound in the future. So where we had egnov, we have eftach. And there is no vav here, it's just eftach. Eftach, tiftach. Oops, no, tiftachi. Yiftach. What do you think this will be? Anyone want to fill in the blank? Tiftach. Okay, what's going to be anachnu? Fill in the blank.
Niftach.
Niftach. What's going to be atem? Atem. Kate, fill in the blank. Atem.
Teeth. Tell.
Yeah, tiftechu.
So you just don't add anything
Yeah,
in the middle.
there is no
It's the
vav
same.
in there. It's a. It's not o. It's a. And yiftechu. Yiftechu. This happens whenever it ends on a chet. It will happen
Okay.
because of the chet. Okay. Certain letters that are guttural at the end will cause that to happen, but not always. Sometimes it can just be that's how the form is, right? Like I said, pa'al has the most exceptions of any of the binyanim. So that's one of them, is that you have all these different types of verbs that have slightly different forms. The one I showed you before that goes egnov, tignov, that is most common with the vav in there. And then certain verbs will have a, eftach, tiftach. Okay. Any questions about that? This is a lot of information, so I want to try to present it in a way that is not too overwhelming or will make some sense. So let's look at, we just looked at two verbs for pa. Now let's jump to nifal. So nifal, here's for example, on page 1, back on page 1. So here's a perfect example. You got gonev, nignav, right? Pa'al means to steal, the nifal means to be stolen, right? So that's just the passive voice of the pa'al verb. And what's the form? So, by the way, the name of the binyan is its form in the past tense, masculine, third person form, right? So like pa'al, ganav. If you look at the past tense, third person, who form, it's ganav, right? Nifal, nignav. Do you see what I'm saying? In other words, it is the third person past tense form made out of this root. This is the root. Pei, ein, right? Pei, ein, lamed, which means to take action or to do an action. This literally just means action, like verb. So it's used as the, like the dummy verb for making all these names of these binyanim. Now we're looking at nifal. Nifal, and the root is, we'll go back to this one. Okay, and this means to be stolen. Okay, nignav. So, how is it formed in the future? In the future, it looks like this. It has a yud added after this one, which I noticed that the first form doesn't have the yud, which is, I think might be a typo, because I thought it always had the yud.
What do you mean for the ani?
Yeah, I guess ani form doesn't get the yud. All right. So there's no yud in the ani form, but the rest of them all get a yud. This yud is part of what makes it nifal in the future. So in the hu form, we'll actually get two yuds. One is for because it's future tense. One is because it's nifal, right? So all of these are getting the yud, the extra yud, right? And then they all have almost the same form, which is just like the way the root goes, and it's pronounced, the vowels will be a-e, ganev, right? So e-ganev, and this will be ti-ganev, and this will be ti-ganev, gan v, right? Because again, we have this one, oh, so it's already there, right?
How do you know that it's ganev? That that's the sound that it, is that always just like
That's
the
how
sound
it's
that it
gonna
makes
be.
in?
The vowels are part of the binyan, right? That's the beauty of it. It's like a template. Think of the vowels as built into the binyan, it's built into the template. You're only changing the root letters, right? Does that make sense?
I thought you said the binyan was always based on the past tense, masculine third person, so that's nignav.
The name of the binyan.
Oh, okay. But
The
the
name
actual...
of the binyan is nifal,
Mhm.
and so the name of this one will be nignav,
Mhm.
right? We call this verb nignav.
Right.
When we refer to the verb, we call it nignav. That is in the past tense,
Mhm.
masculine, third person form.
But then when you look at the future tense, you're saying it
Yeah.
has a different form.
When we do the future tense, the vowels are all different. And the way it's built in the future is you've got the same exact prefixes as you do in every other binyan. But then you have this one. The vowels of the actual root are going to be ganev. Okay? That's how it's going to go. And so it's going to be pronounced eganev. And then here in all the other forms, add an extra yud. All right? And it's going to be tiganev, tiganvi. Why? This adds an e at the end, so this gets shortened between the nun and the vet. All right, so it's going to be tiganev, tiganvi. You want to guess this one? Who? Hey,
Yiganev.
Yiganev. Okay, Yiganev. He is going to be the same as this form, ata. Ata and he will be the same forever in the future. So, and you want to guess? He. Yeah, Tiganev. He Tiganev. Okay. What about anachnu? Anachnu.
Niganev?
Niganev. Exactly. It follows the same pattern. This part here, Ganev, is just always going to be Ganev. It's that simple. It's like the Yud is adding an E after this initial prefix, right? So that's added to all of them, and that's what makes it this binyan, is the difference, is you add this Yud in there after the prefix, but then the root itself gets the vowels Ganev, like A'e, Ganev, Ganev, Tiganev, Tiganvi. Why is it Tiganvi? Because you added E at the end, so you shorten this. Tiganvi, Yiganev, Tiganev, Niganev, right? Atem, remember you add a vowel at the end. Anyone want to guess?
Tiganvi. Tiganvu.
Tiganvu. And then Yiganvu. Yiganvu. Okay? Any questions? Or are there too many questions to answer?
Why is there an asterisk less commonly used? versus
Yeah, which one are you looking at?
less
Okay,
common?
there are other forms that are used in academia and in the Bible and in very, very high level Hebrew that are not used in common spoken language.
Okay.
Okay, and we're not looking at them today because we have enough to deal with today. But yeah, these are forms that exist. Okay, so yeah, what they're telling you here is, in the chart, is that there is, all right, we have the atem form, which is you plural. We look at this one form. Now, there is aten, which is you plural, if I'm speaking to all three of you because you're all female. So if it's all you females, it says different form. In modern Hebrew, in spoken Hebrew, in like everyday, not just spoken, written, everything, everyday normal, your normal, regular, day-to-day Hebrew, up to the level of extremely high academia, like PhD level academia, okay, something like that. In school, everywhere, you would use this form for both atem and atem. Okay, so you use this one all the time. and you use this one all the time. Okay, for ham and for hen. Okay. But then there's another form here. They're telling you atan and hen may have another less commonly used form, right? That is very high level academic form. So,
So
and that's
a tote, what is a tote then?
what's what?
A tote? No, is that's not,
What's what? Sorry.
okay, it's not a word then, I guess.
No.
I had written down previously the female plural for you is a tote.
No, it's atan.
Oh,
Atem, yeah. Atem is for masculine and atem is feminine. So let's take a look at another one. I want to go to page. Let's go to page 5. This is Nephi. We're looking at page 5 on the left side up top. Nephi. This one, the root we're looking at now. Okay, I'm gonna leave this up. We're gonna do this verbally. The root is samach gimel resh. Okay, sagar. Sagar in pal means to close. Sagar in nifal, which would be nisgar. Nisgar means to be closed, right? So if I say I closed the window versus the window was closed, right, would be pa'al versus nifal. So let's look at the nifal here. You can see, I just want you to see that it's exactly the same pattern. So in the future, ani, now this would be, like again, it's like last time, these are theoretical. Like, when will I be closed? You know, I won't be closed. These are theoretical, you know. If a window in the cartoon is talking and says, oh, I'm gonna be closed soon, that's when you would use this form, right? But so it's like but ani esager, ata tisager, at tisgri, sorry. Hu yisager, oh, hu yisager, hi tisager, anachnu nisager, atem tisgru, yisagru, and yisagru. Okay, any questions about the form? Does it make sense in your mind?
Do you have the purple marker?
Yeah, I have a purple marker.
Will you make the U on the third one purple?
This
The
one?
end, yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
There you go. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Does the collar help?
It does help.
So, okay. All right. Now let's take a look at another one. Let's take a look at page. Page 3. This one needs to open. We're going to go back to this word. Hey, tap, chet, patach. Right? Same thing. Liftoch, to open. Leipatach, to be open, right? Patach, he opened. Niftach, it was opened. Okay? So let's look at the future. Okay? So again, you've got epatach, epatach. Tipatach. Okay, let's keep going with it. Fill in the blank. Fill in the blank. Epatach, tipatach,
Tipatachi.
tipatchi.
Tipatchi. Oh,
Yeah,
because
is
you
that